Welcome to another episode of GBLOC's Go Deeper podcast series. My name is Sheila, and I am the Community and Program Director here at GBLOC. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to a GBLOC member, Veronica Broomes. She is the founder of Sustainability Support Service, which provides cost-effective and expert-led sustainability support to help other small and medium enterprises boost growth and increase competitiveness through integrating people, planet, and profit considerations. She offers sustainability trainings, training seminars, carbon reduction plans, and sustainability audits. She's a dynamic business founder with over 25 years of professional experience across multiple sectors and was also a business coach and mentor for over 14 years. Welcome, Veronica. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you ever so much, Sheila, for that introduction. As I listen to it, I'm thinking, wow. Even I am impressed because it has been a long while and there are times you may forget how much you've had to cover during that time. So thank you very much for that warm introduction to the podcast.
My pleasure. So let's dive in. So the first question we ask all our members is to tell us your why. What do you consider to be your purpose or your mission or your driving force for how you choose to live and the choices you make?
That is a profound question. What I say underpinning my why is to be able to make a difference in a positive way, a difference not only to my business clients, but a difference to the wider world and the community. And I'd say that that stems from maybe my early career in terms of working in research and actually working at what was then the cutting edge of plant biotechnology in an agricultural research system. And fast forward to today, where I'm actually an entrepreneur, a business founder, and I would not have seen that in the vision that I would have had for myself so many decades ago. So I would say that my why is very much about ensuring that whatever I do, I can bring the knowledge, the expertise, the insights that will help others to be able to move from where they are now to where they'd like to be or they need to be. And in that way, also help them to create new visions, new missions, new modalities and ways in which they can actually do their business. And at present, a lot of that is through integrating the people, the planet, the economic, as well as the governance aspects of sustainability into day-to-day operations. So it becomes part of what you do rather than a costly bolted on.
I want to go a little bit off book. I'm really curious. You shared, I'm curious, like what inspired you to pursue plant sciences? And then where did that take you in terms, and then how did you find yourself working in business? I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that story because I think that's
It'll be the short version rather than the long version. So it takes me back to high school. So in terms of schooling, I went to a secondary school that had options when I got to what was then considered your third form. So primary school and then secondary school. And when I got to third form, I realized, no, I wasn't an arts person because I had very little interest in languages. I loved Spanish, but I struggled with French. And if you're going into the art stream, you needed to do two foreign languages as well as English.
Okay.
I also thought that science appealed to me, and maybe because it was the analytical aspects associated with it, maybe because there was new learning. And so I thought, yes, I'd like to do science. And in fact, at that time, I actually thought that I'd be doing something in the health sciences related to healthcare. But I soon learned when I discovered that it takes 7 years to be qualified as a medical practitioner, I thought, there's no way I'd study 7 years in terms of science. But I ended up studying more than that because I did a first degree and then I did a PhD subsequently. But I was able to find my niche because I was interested in applications of science, and in particular, the applications to plant science and crop science. And so when I studied different aspects of agricultural science. So I learned about plants and animals and soils, but I also recognized that plants would have been what I had greatest interest in. And so subsequently, it led to me learning more about how plants work at a tissue level and how they can actually be influenced with appropriate nutrients or growth regulators. In humans, we say hormones, to be able to grow roots or shoots, and how they can be used to accelerate the growth of plants, as well as create within an agricultural research system, or a system that where people grow food, to be able to, or grow crops for food, to be able to help people who want to introduce new varieties of vegetatively propagated plants, not from seeds, but to be able to do so through a tissue culture facility, as well as to protect the plant germplasm that traditionally would have been stored in a field gene bank, meaning that you needed to subject it to the elements, the weather conditions, the insects, the pathogens, the diseases that would affect them if they're growing outdoors, but it meant that you can now do this in a controlled environment. So that was fascinating. And I got to the stage where, after completing my PhD and returning to my home country, because I'm originally from Guyana, which is at the top of the South American continent, and it's historically and culturally part of the Caribbean. And I returned to Guyana to set up the plant tissue culture facility, and that was cutting edge because it was the first facility of its kind being set up in the country. So those were exciting times. And the fact that I could have used my science to be able to make a change and to make that difference in terms of applying science to practical solutions. But then I soon recognized that if you're working in research, you need to be able to continue advancing and expanding the boundaries. And if it becomes routine, or when it becomes routine, you're very much overqualified in that role. And so I left that type of research and I moved into using my science to do environmental impact assessments, because at that time, the environment and biodiversity was becoming of great importance. And so one thing led to the other. So environmental impact assessments for a number of years. And then I started doing some social impact assessments, so learning a little more about the people. And that led into strategic approaches to how business can link with communities or with science to be able to make a difference. And for a few years, I undertook research on corporate social responsibility, but not philanthropy, strategic approaches to corporate social responsibility, so that you can link policy making at country level or at local level with inward investment. And so it was that journey that took me from the lab to the research area, but working at a more strategic and policy level in terms of the research that I undertook. And then because that was also part of my initial exposure as working as an independent consultant and doing shorter term projects, it meant that that was part of the journey that I undertook. So moving from science didn't happen overnight, and I hadn't set out to work in business, but circumstances led to that. But it meant that throughout that, whilst I've done, and I do have non-science related entrepreneurial activities, it's always been my love to be able to ensure that I can include the scientific perspective in what I do. And what I do now in terms of sustainability actually would have had a link with some of the part-time work or lecturing I was doing whilst I worked in research, which was helping agricultural science students to understand the implications of climate change and what that would mean, not only to agricultural activities, but also to health. So
Wonderful.
that was meant to be the short version, but I think
That's
that
great. It's
I
just a
needed to
fascinating
capture
journey.
several aspects in order to explain why I am doing what I do now.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
linked with business rather than still being in a lab doing research.
And so let's move towards some of the GBLOC pillars and some questions that I'd love to explore with you. So So we talk a lot about connection here in GBLOC. So how do you choose who you actively build a professional relationship with, or a personal one? What's important to you?
I would say it depends, because now I build both professional and personal relationships, not only with people that I would have met previously traditionally face to face, but also with people who I've never met in person.
Mm,
And so for the online, it may be that we happen to be in the same forum or the same place or have the same interests. I may be struck by a comment or a response that someone has made. Someone may reach out to me in terms of some comments I've made, and not the sort of DMs would say, oh, I'm selling whatever I'm selling.
yes.
But it means that maybe there's some serendipity in that leads to those types of engagement. Or we may be attending the same virtual meetings on a regular basis. And then we get to the point where either we're in a breakout room, or I may message to say virtual coffee or cuppa, so that we have a further discussion. So sometimes that is how it evolves, rather than setting out to build those relationships in
Yeah.
terms of the online space. Now, in terms of the face-to-face situation, it very much depends on, again, it depends on what's happening. So for example, yesterday I was at a face-to-face networking event. Well, it wasn't a networking event. It was an event that had something to do with smaller and medium enterprises. And I was interested because it had a link with the supply chain, and it also had our local authority and other businesses present. So I thought, great opportunity to be there. But it was not only for the information shared and the insights from others, but it was also meeting new people, because we had similar interests, or someone may have made a comment that I resonated with. And interestingly enough, I met two persons, one of whom I had known before, and I was surprised. Well, she was surprised that I was there, although she knew that I may have attended. So it was a catch up to have a chat with her. And we had met earlier this year and had a lengthy conversation since, and have spoken since. So it was a good catch up. And then there was someone who I had spoken with a couple of years ago, because she was on a podcast, a guest on a podcast I was hosting, who I've never met in person. But she heard my voice and she heard my name, and she said, oh, and she gave her name. And so that was interesting, because although we had spoken, we had great rapport, we'd never met in person. So in
Mm,
terms of building those relationships, I'd say often is circumstantial. And if it's deliberate, or if it's linked with particular mutual interests, well, then it can also be through mutual organizations.
wonderful. So I'm now going to ask about community. So what are the communities you actively engage in and why?
Maybe I should do personal first this time before doing business.
Sure.
And I'd say one of the communities I'm engaged with now is actually a volunteering community, and it's Rotary International. I'm a member of the Rotary Direct group, or Direct Hub, that comes under Great Britain and Ireland. Rotary International is actually an organization that's been around for decades,
Yeah.
over a century. And it started in Chicago in the US. There are clubs and groups in more than 200 countries around the world. And I had been a member of a traditional Rotary Club, a lunchtime Rotary Club. We'd meet for lunch and have fellowship. But just about 3 years ago, I discovered that there was actually an online version. And so Rotary, because of the work that it does in helping communities and peoples locally and around the world, it was an organization that has always held a positive place in my heart. And I was delighted by the opportunity to return to Rotary. Now, although I'm super busy, I still wanted to be part of Rotary, and I wanted to be involved in a project, but no project has come up as such. And I just didn't have the time to go looking for a project. But I've actually discovered how I can support Rotary and build community. And I do this every month through giving a presentation that introduces new members to Rotary. So that is my way of building community and supporting the activities and the aims and the objectives of Rotary International.
Wonderful. So we're going to move on to a question in around the area of contribution. Can you tell us a favorite story of creating impact for someone in your life or through your work?
Now, that is profound.
Mhm.
I would say in terms of through my life, I probably would say I'm actually the eldest of 5 siblings. And I lost my mother quite early. I was still a teenager when I lost my mother. And I know that that has had a profound effect on me ever since.
Mm.
And so because of that, I know that whatever I would have contributed or I would have done or I would have, my activities in my early years as a teenager would have had an impact in terms of the rest of my siblings, my younger siblings. Now, because my parents subscribed strongly to the importance of education, it meant that for me, one way of being able to build that community and have that positive impact was being able to ensure that despite losing my mother, I still had education as a priority. So it meant that this happened whilst I was in high school, but I still went on to study post-high school because I knew that that was one way of not only recognizing or realizing potential that I would have had, but it was also consistent with what some may say is setting an example to others who would recognize that despite challenges, there's resilience that can come out of that, and it can serve you well in
Wonderful.
later life and through different facets of life.
Mm. So our final question, if you could run GBLOC for a day, what would you do with the community?
Oh, I'd love to do that if I think about it, because it means I'll have over 3,000 people who are interested in GBLOC and who want to be able to showcase what they're doing. And so I think an important part of that would be actually engagement. So first, I would prompt people, I'd encourage people to write what's their favorite item of clothing, or maybe their favorite movie, or something that, or favorite meal, or something that people can share in terms of favorites, because that can be a way of not only seeing the variety, but helping people to take themselves to a positive time. They can anchor themselves in some pleasant memories so that we can begin by having that community. And maybe from that, people can see, they like that, and I also like that. So maybe I can like what they've said. So it can create a buzz in
Yeah.
terms of people thinking, right, this is not hard work, it's simply engaging. And it allows for that break in the formal structure where people are busy pitching for business or
Yeah.
sharing their services.
Yeah.
And then maybe because of my research background, or maybe because of lived experiences in terms of business, I love to ask questions around polls. In fact, I love to ask questions, and this is often manifest in terms of polls. So it's just that it's my way of finding out. And open questions are often great for that because you're hearing from people rather than only telling them what you have to say. And
100%.
so I'd love to ask some polling questions, some questions that would allow people to respond in a way that would say, yes, here are some options, this is what I think or not. And then there are those who may feel motivated to make comments. Because I think when people are asked and they're given some options, it's easy for them to take a few seconds to respond. But if
Yeah.
they feel strongly enough, they're then able to, or they feel compelled, they will then add comments in. And I'd set a challenge. And so I do a challenge for people to invite others who they think would love to be part of the GBLOC community. And so I would say, let's have this competition going. And what I'd also want to do is to have a circle around that, which means that I'd say, if you invite someone and they accept your invitation and they're in the group, you have a responsibility and an obligation, in fact, to say, welcome to the group. Thanks for accepting my invitation. Because again, it allows for that exchange of people feeling welcome and then others being able to return the favor.
Well, thank you so much. I love those ideas. We'll have to write that one down and see what we can implement from that. It sounds very creative and really fun. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. We are delighted to have you here as part of GBLOC. And do you want to quickly share about your event that you have happening?
Thank you very much for that. And then can I also say thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this. And
Yeah.
yes, I do have a special event which is happening on the 22nd of October, and that is a Tuesday. So it's just over a month away. And what makes it special is that it's aimed primarily at small and medium enterprises. It's a sustainability summit for small and medium enterprises, and it's about other businesses, other entrepreneurs talking about or sharing examples of what they're doing and how they've been able to integrate the planet and the people in order to make business sense, to reduce costs, and there are also some keynotes and fireside chats. So the event is called the Sustainability Summit for Small and Medium Enterprises. I'd be posting a link in GBLOC in due course. We also have it on our business page and on Eventbrite. And when the post or the podcast is shared, people will be able to see my tags, how to connect with me, and I'd be more than happy to have those conversations in terms of people who would like to attend and who would like to contribute. We're also still looking for sponsors. And so if someone would like to have their organization or their business associated with us, let's have a conversation. Let's chat about that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. And we are delighted to have you part of GBLOC.
My pleasure. And thank you ever so much, Sheila, for a warm and engaging interview.